Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We get the first AP Top 25 poll getting released, and this is the pinnacle of being a college football fan where we get up here and just get worked up about a preseason rankings that was made by sports writers that know just as much as us about college football, with knowing dang well that all these games are going to get played in a couple of Saturdays in the fall, but we're still going to get worked up about it, talk about some teams that I think got left out of this top 25 that I fully expect to be in the top 25 come the end of November. Talk about some teams that I think are ranked too low. Talk about some teams that I think are ranked too high. Really excited to get into this conversation, kind of take a bird's eye approach to the landscape of college football. Now, before we get into it, would love to hear you guys in the comments section. I know every single college football fan that's listening to this has some sort of team that they think's being slept on. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section, whether you agree with some of my takes, whether you disagree. That's the beauty of the sport of college football. So would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. The amount of support y'all have shown in the offseason, it's been absolutely amazing. We appreciate you guys. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And let's start with some teams that I think are not in this top 25 that I think will certainly be in the top 25 come the end of November. I'm going to start with a program I've been banging table for pretty much all offseason. That is the Auburn Tigers. Now, you look at this Auburn team in 2023, it is no secret that they struggled on the offensive side of the football. What not enough people are recognizing, at least in my opinion, is on the surface level. You see Peyton Thorne coming back for 2024 and just kind of write off this Auburn program. There are some reasons that I think this Auburn offense takes some massive steps in 2024. One is Peyton Thorne just getting better in this Auburn offense. I think it's important to realize that, Peyton Thorne was not with this Auburn program last year during the spring. I mean, he came in the summer, went through a quarterback battle, not getting a ton of reps with the ones, and kind of was just thrusted out there in the 2023 season. And you saw some growing pains in terms of Auburn trying to figure out what makes Peyton Thorne most comfortable in the offense. But I think more importantly, this Auburn offense last year just lacked playmakers on the outside. It was, for my money, one of the worst wide receiving rooms that you saw in the SEC, if not the worst. You take a look and kind of fast forward to where we sit heading into 2024. One, Peyton Thorne getting a full offseason within this Auburn offense. Hugh Freeze, this offensive staff, just getting a little bit more comfortable in terms of how we want to use Peyton Thorne, the things that we want to ask Peyton Thorne to do. That relationship, I think, matters a lot more than people give him credit. You know what I mean? In terms of the offensive coordinator understanding, the offensive play call, the offensive staff understanding, hey, what makes Peyton Thorne the most comfortable? What plays and what schemes and what packages can we go to that Peyton Thorne is going to have the most success with? I think you're going to see a massive improvement in terms of that. But I think more importantly, just the talent around Peyton Thorne is significantly better than it was in 2023, where you go back to 2023, the leading pass catcher for this Auburn program was tight end Rivaldo Fairweather, a tight end that I'm a massive, massive fan of. That being said, it tells you that the wide receiver production, the wide receiver play just wasn't nearly good enough in the 2023 season. You fast forward to where this roster sits heading into 2024 and say, you're bringing Keandre Lambert-Smith from Penn State, legitimate wide receiver one. You add a true freshman in Cam Coleman, who sounds like he might be the wide receiver one with this Auburn offense. You got two legitimate difference makers on the outside, whereas in 2023, you had zero. You also have a guy like Robert Lewis. You have a couple of young freshmen in Bryce Caines, Malcolm Simmons, Perry Thompson. This team around Peyton Thorne is significantly more talented on offense than it was last year. And I'd remind everybody that when we saw Peyton Thorne get surrounded by some legitimate talent back at Michigan State with guys like Jaden Reed, Keon Coleman, he won 11 football games for Michigan State. Peyton Thorne's a quarterback that I think you can win football games with if you surround him with talent. I think they've done that heading into 2024. Give me the Auburn Tigers as a team that works their way into the top 25. The next team I want to shout out, Virginia Tech. This Virginia Tech team, I'm buying stock in. You look at all the things that I think are working for Virginia Tech. One, it's going year 3 under Brent Pry. I think that's massive storyline in terms of within that Virginia Tech program. You can kind of feel the culture kind of changing. Brent Pry kind of grabbing command of this program. But I think more importantly, In the era of the transfer portal, you don't have a ton of returning production and continuity with a lot of these programs. For Virginia Tech, they're pretty much running back their team from 2023 in 2024, a team that started to find its rhythm at the end of 2023. And I think they have a quarterback in Kyron Drones who can be is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the ACC and has the capability of being one of the better quarterbacks in the conference. In a very similar conversation that we had with Peyton Thorne, you look at Kyron Drones, he was the quarterback too, heading into 2023, took over this offense. I think there were some growing pains in terms of how we want to use Kyron Drones in this offense towards the end of 2023. Virginia Tech started to understand how they wanted to use Kyron Drones. That rushing attack really took a step. I look at Virginia Tech and say, you return pretty much the whole roster from 2023's team. You're going year 3 under Brent Pry. You got a quarterback that we expect to take a step in 2024 season. Give me Virginia Tech as a team that's going to be extremely salty in this 2024 season. And the last team I want to shout out, another ACC team, the Louisville Cardinals. I think the big conversation is Tyler Shuck. If you get a healthy Tyler Shuck, that is not enough people are talking about the upgrade that you're getting from Tyler Shuck to Jack Plummer to Tyler Shuck. I mean, Jack Plummer was a below average quarterback in the ACC, and this Louisville team still played for an ACC championship. If you get a healthy Tyler Shuck for 12 games, which is a big asterisk caveat, right? Tyler Shuck has not played a healthy season in his college football career. If you get Tyler Shuck healthy for 12 games, this Louisville team takes a massive step in the right direction. They added a ton of talent in the transfer portal. I truly think Coach Brom is one of the better coaches in the country in terms of maximizing talent, designing an offense. Give me Virginia Tech, Louisville, and Auburn as 2 or 3 teams, that I think finish in the top 25. Now you get into some teams that we see in the top 25 that I think are still a little bit too low. I want to start with the Miami Hurricanes coming in at 19. And I think even Miami fans probably look at that ranking and say, we're not going to argue with it too much, right? We've been a team that has talent, but hasn't been able to put it together from a pure roster standpoint. This Miami Hurricanes team rivals just about any team in the country in terms of talent. I think it's a top 10 team in terms of talent on paper. Now, the question is, can they take that talent on paper and implement it and have it show up on Saturdays in the fall? That's the question. What makes me feel that Miami can do that in the 2024 season? It obviously starts with quarterback Cam Ward, who, look, Cam Ward is just a massive upgrade in terms of the quarterback play that they had not only last year, but the last couple of years. I think having a quarterback that elevates your roster as opposed to a quarterback that you have to figure out how to win with, that's a massive storyline for Miami. But I think more importantly, in the conversation that not enough people are having around this Miami Hurricanes program is they are, in my opinion, elite along the line of scrimmage. I think that's one of the better front sevens that you're going to see on the defensive side of the football. I think it's an elite offensive line. If you have line of scrimmage play that can control the point of attack, you can kind of have games go your way. And so not only does Miami have the quarterback play that I think makes them significantly better, unquestionably better than they were in 2023, I think they have the line of scrimmage play to bang with teams that are some of the best teams in the country. And I think that's kind of what separates me with Miami as opposed to the last couple of years. A very similar conversation that we had with Texas last year, 12 months ago. And why were we believing in Texas last year? Because of the line of scrimmage. I mean, you look at Texas prior to that 2023 season, it was a team that underperformed, had some talent, but never really put it on the football field. What made Texas just kind of feel different heading into 2023 was the line of scrimmage play, both on the offense and defensive line. And we saw that kind of come to fruition in that 2023 season. I think it's a very similar conversation to have with this Miami Hurricanes program. Now, getting to a few other teams that I think might be a little bit too low. I think Texas A&M at 20. Again, it's a fair ranking. We've seen Texas A&M have talented teams and just not be able to put it together. One, I'm a believer in Mike Elko, but number 2, I think, again, that front seven, specifically that defensive line, is a top 5 unit in the country. When you have a defensive line that's as good as Texas A&M, that's the recipe in terms of having an elite defense in the college football landscape. You think of Georgia the last couple of years, Michigan in 2023. When you have a defensive line that can stop the run on first and second down, get after the passer on third down, it makes a defense so much easier to run. You're bringing Coach Colin Klein on the offensive side of the football. I think Connor Wigman is one of the more underrated quarterbacks really in the country heading into 2024. If you get a healthy Connor Wigman, this Texas A&M offense takes a massive step from where it was in 2023. So those are two teams that I'm kind of believing in heading into 2024 that I think probably finish higher than what you see in the rankings. I'd maybe throw in USC as, and again, that's kind of a similar conversation. I think a lot of USC fans are saying, all right, 23 is fair. We obviously had a tough season in 2023. We need to show that we have a defense that can win football games in the Big Ten. That being said, you look at USC in the landscape of the Big Ten, where does Miller Moss rank in terms of quarterback rankings in the Big Ten heading into 2024? I would argue that you might get a top 5, top 3 quarterback in the Big Ten from Miller Moss. And if you have league quarterback playing the Big Ten, a conference that I think it's a really good conference, right? There's a reason that Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State are all in the top 10. There's not a ton of great quarterback play in the Big Ten. If Miller Moss can emerge as one of the better quarterbacks in that conference and that defense takes a step with D'Anton Lynn, you're looking at a really dangerous team in the Big Ten for USC. And what my kind of last pitch on USC would be, we just saw D'Anton Lynn completely revolutionize the defense for UCLA in 2023. Why can't he do that with arguably a more talented team on defense in 2024? I mean, D'Anton Lynn immediately changed that UCLA defense. Why can't he do it for USC in 2024? That is probably the question that I would ask a lot of you guys who might be sleeping on USC. Now, some teams that I think might be too high, I'm going to go to Arizona at 21. Arizona's tough, right? Because you look at Noah Fafita and T-Mac and say, that's one of, if not the best, quarterback wide receiver battery that we see in all of college football. That being said, what does this team look like outside of those two players? I think there are some legitimate questions in terms of line of scrimmage play for this Arizona team. And we kind of all know, we kind of saw it with Colorado last year. You can have a really good quarterback. You can have some really dynamic wide receivers, but if you cannot get it done along the line of scrimmage, it's really hard to consistently win football games in a college football season. I have significant question marks about Arizona along the line of scrimmage. And again, I'm a believer in Noah Fafita and T-Mac. I think they're two of the better players in all of college football. But outside of that, you kind of do have some significant questions about line of scrimmage play. Now, going all the way up to the top, and let's kind of just go through this and, talk about some teams that I think might be ranked too high or low. Georgia, number 1. I don't think anybody's getting up here and questioning that. Ohio State and Oregon are my 2 and 3 teams. Now, it kind of depends on when I wake up. We're going to get that game October 12th. And so I don't think it's worth really diving into who we think is Ohio State, Oregon. 2 and 3, I think clearly. And then we're going to figure out who's the number 2 team in the country on October 12th. You get Texas at number 4. No arguments there. I think there's a pretty clear top 4 teams in the country in terms of complete rosters heading into 2024. Those are your top 4 teams. Now, where things get a little bit hairy for me is Alabama, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan, Florida State. How do you kind of stack those next couple teams between 5 and 15? Because I think there's legitimate kind of arguments for a lot of those teams. Alabama is still a very, very talented team. And Coach Kalen DeBoer is a very, very good coach. And so it's kind of hard to doubt Alabama, even without Nick Saban heading into 2024. I love Ole Miss at 6. I'm a believer in Ole Miss, in kind of a very similar conversation to why I'm a believer in Miami, where I think Jackson Dart is a legitimate top quarterback in the country. I think they have a very dynamic wide receivers on the outside, but specifically why is Ole Miss a team that I'm buying stock in heading into 2024 is because the line of scrimmage play, this is the best line of scrimmage play we'll see Ole Miss have since Lane Kiffin's been in Oxford, Mississippi. And that matters. You talk about why Ole Miss has failed to kind of crack the upper echelon of the SEC during Lane Kiffin's tenure. It's largely had to do with the line of scrimmage. And I would remind people that Ole Miss was 11-2 last year with their only 2 losses on the road to Georgia, on the road to Alabama. This was a team that was, I think, kind of got slept on in the 2023 season. I think they get better in the transfer portal. They return a ton of talent from that roster. Give me all the stock that we have in Ole Miss. Notre Dame at 7, I'd probably be a little lower on Notre Dame than the 7th best team in the country. With the injury, excuse me, from Charles Jagasaw at the left tackle spot, we already had question marks about Notre Dame replacing 2 NFL tackles, one of which was, in my opinion, the best tackle in the country, and Joe Alt. Now the guy that you kind of thought was going to take over the left tackle spot is going to miss the season in 2024 with a pectoral injury. I like Notre Dame's team. I think it's a top 5 defense in the country. I'm a believer in Riley Leonard, but again, line of scrimmage play specifically at that offensive tackle spot, that's kind of putting out red sirens to me. Like if a team is in the top 10 but has question marks at the tackle position, that is alarming for me having Notre Dame at 7. Penn State at 8, I think, is one of the more fascinating teams in the country. Coach Kotelnicki, that's probably the biggest storyline for Penn State. We know they're going to be very good on defense. They have a talented quarterback in Drew Aller, but can this Penn State offense be more explosive in the 2024 season? Can Coach Kotelnicki bring that out of them? Because if he does, and we see a Penn State offense that is significantly more explosive than what we saw in 2023, that's been this thing that's been holding Penn State back in those big games against Michigan and Ohio State. If we get that version of Penn State, Coach Kotelnicki, I think, is one of the better offensive coordinators in the country. This Penn State team is going to be really dangerous. Michigan coming in at number 9. You guys know I'm a Michigan fan. I think that is probably a fair ranking. What I would say for Michigan is their recipe to winning football games, I think, is still very much prevalent to the 2024 season, where they're going to run the football a lot with a talented backfield and offensive line that I think people are sleeping on. It's a lot of new faces, but a lot of guys that have been within this program, guys that probably would have started on a lot of other offensive lines that you saw in the country last year. They're going to run the football. They're going to play really good defense. This Michigan team is going to be a very tough out on Saturdays, but you do have some question marks about this roster, obviously at the quarterback position being number 1. Florida State at 10, not going to see too much argument for me. Again, kind of a similar conversation with Michigan, where you lose a lot of guys to the NFL, but there are still players on this roster that we believe in. Missouri, I'm a believer in. I think they have a very gettable schedule, but again, I think Brady Cook and Luther Burden get all the attention. That offensive line is going to be one of the better units in the SEC. That's what not enough people are talking about with Missouri. And you talk about kind of a similar conversation we had with Ole Miss. What kind of prevents a lot of SEC teams from reaching that top level in the SEC? It's line of scrimmage play. I think Missouri, specifically on the offensive line, it has the guys to kind of break through and be one of the better teams in the SEC. Utah at 12, obviously Cam Rising coming back. If they stay healthy, that's going to be a team that's really tough to beat in the Big 12. I think it comes down to Utah and Kansas State. LSU at 13, similar conversation with USC. We think the offense is going to be good. Garrett Nussmeier, they got some more talent at wide receiver. I think a lot of people probably don't appreciate the talent that LSU has at wide receiver heading into 2024. I'm personally a believer in the LSU offense. Now the question is, can Blake Baker let this LSU defense improve, and how much do they improve is probably the question you have for LSU. Clemson at 14 is a very sneaky team. I think I might be higher on Clemson than 14. I think they have a very, very good defense. Then you look at the offense and say that's kind of determines where you put Clemson in your top 25. I'm personally a believer in Kate Klubnik and Clemson's offense not being the best offense in the country, but kind of similar to Auburn, where this team has a really solid offensive line, I think. I think the wide receivers going into year 2 of Garrett Riley's scheme, I think the wide receiver talent's much better. I think you're going year 2 into Garrett Riley's offense with Kate Klubnik at quarterback. There are reasons to believe, similar to the reasons with Auburn and Peyton Thorne, that this offense gets better. Tennessee at 15, Josh Heupel's going to have good offense with Nico. I think that Tennessee's defense is going to be very, very good. That's another one of those teams that could be a top 10 team in the country come the end of the season. Oklahoma at 16, really good defense, I think, this year. Question marks on the offensive line. That's probably the one thing that's preventing me from putting Oklahoma up higher. And if we see that Oklahoma offensive line come together in 2024, I think that team's also going to be very dangerous. I expect another significant jump from Oklahoma on the defensive side of the football. The big thing that's kind of keeping me from putting Oklahoma in the top 10 is you're going into the SEC with trying to figure out this offensive line continually in fall camp with the young quarterback in Jackson Arnold. They have the talent on the outside. If this Oklahoma offensive line can come together and we get the best version of Jackson Arnold, that Oklahoma team is going to be dangerous. Oklahoma State, I'm lower on. I think Oklahoma State they return a lot of production from a very quality team in 2023. Just the more I watched Oklahoma State during that 2023 year, I go back and do some prep on them. I'm not sure if they were as good as what kind of the rankings had them in the 2023 season. That being said, Coach Gundy's a hard coach to count out. Kansas State, I would have over Oklahoma State. I think Kansas State with Avery Jones and the talent that they have. Avery Jones is the best quarterback we've seen at Kansas State in quite a long time, and Kansas State's always been a very solid team. And Avery Jones kind of pushed out Will Howard. I think that tells you what this Kansas State team thinks of Avery Jones, and I think the question I would have is, we know this Kansas State team is going to be damn solid every single year. Now they have, in my opinion, a legitimate difference maker at the quarterback spot. What does this Kansas State team look like? We talked about Miami, Texas A&M, Arizona. Kansas, when you have Jalen Daniels and all that production on offense returning, this is going to be an offense that scores points. I think Coach Leipold has consistently improved the overall roster of this team. My big question mark is Coach Koldenicki heading over to Penn State. Does this Kansas offense look the same from what we saw in 2023 and 2022? That's the question I have. Obviously, Jalen Daniels staying healthy. NC State, straight up believer in. I think they could be a better team than 24th in the country. This is a team that is, again, kind of similar to a team like Auburn. I think got better where they needed to get better. We know that NC State defense is going to be extremely difficult to deal with. You look on the offense, that was where their struggles came. They still won 8 football games in the 2023 season with a quarterback that flat out stunk last year. And Brennan Armstrong, they were kind of juggling him and MJ Morris. They only had Kevin Concepcion as a difference maker on offense. Now you look and say, all right, we get Kevin Concepcion back. We add Noah Rogers. We add a couple of talented true freshmen. We add Wesley Grimes, Justin Jolie, Jordan Waters in the backfield. This team is significantly better on the offensive side of the football. And if we just kind of trust NC State to hold serve on defense, which they've done for the last 5 to 10 years with Dave Doran, and this offense takes a massive step in the right direction, which I think is certainly a possibility, that's a really dangerous NC State team. I'll say this. I think this is the most talented NC State team we've seen under Dave Doran. That's a scary proposition for the rest of the ACC. 25 coming in with Iowa. I think they're too high. I look at Iowa and say, you read the scrimmage reports from Cade McNamara on Saturday and say you won, 7 of 21 for 20 yards, 2 picks. Is this Iowa offense even take a marginal step? This team can be really dangerous. I think it's going to be one of the best defenses that we see in the country. That being said, I think they have benefited of playing Big Ten West teams consistently. What happens when they have to play teams that can move the football a little bit more consistently on offense? Can they keep up in terms of the scoring? I'm a little lower on Iowa. I'm not necessarily a believer in the quarterback position. And I think, yes, I think you obviously get better with the offensive coordinator situation. That being said, I just am not a believer in the talent of Iowa on the offensive side of the football. That defense is going to be good. But look, Brian Ferentz was clearly not a good offensive coordinator. There's no arguing that. It was a bottom tier offense every single year for the last couple. That being said, I don't think it was only the offensive coordinator. I mean, they do not recruit the offensive side of the football nearly good enough to put up a lot of points in the Big Ten. So I don't know if that's going to change just because you switch an offensive coordinator. We'll see, though. Again, that team consistently wins games, really good defense. I just have question marks about the Iowa Hawkeyes. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section if you agree with my takes, if you disagree. I'm kind of going to shoot it straight with you guys. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.